It's Movie Monday! Hello everyone and welcome back to The Mind Exhibit. Today we're going to be talking about Thelma and Louise, a cinematic classic, one that we can all enjoy. And I just want to warn you before we get into the video today, we are going to be going over the plot, lots of things that happen, and there will be spoilers. So if you haven't seen the film yet, I highly recommend you go do so right now, or just, whenever you can, and then come back to this video. Unless you don't care about spoilers and you're one of those crazy people, and no worries, that's all good. Whatever works for you. So, without further ado, let's get into the video. In the face of social violence that constantly strikes its force upon these two women in their daily lives, their relationships, and their inner worlds, Thelma and Louise find a sense of adventure and a source for solace in their friendship. Despite their differences between each other, the two are twin flames who find true meaning in love. Set against the harsh backdrop of the American Southwest landscape, Thelma and Louise ride off into the sunset with crime as their unlikely guide. Thelma and Louise, 1991, was directed by Sir Ridley Scott and written by Callie Khouri, who won the Oscar for Best Original Screenplay. The film stars Susan Sarandon as Louise and Geena Davis as Thelma, and features Brad Pitt in one of his breakout roles. Thelma and Louise set out for a weekend at a cabin in the mountains to take a break from their dreary lives in Arkansas. On the way, they stop at a roadhouse bar, where Thelma dances with a flirtatious stranger, Harlan. He then takes advantage of her in the parking lot, but Louise intervenes. As they walk away, Harlan yells he should have continued the abuse, and Louise shoots him. Thelma wants to go to the police, but Louise fears that no one will believe their story. They decide to flee to Mexico, but Louise insists on avoiding Texas due to ghosts from her past. Louise contacts Jimmy, her boyfriend, asking him to wire her life savings to her. He surprises her by delivering the money in person. Jimmy proposes to Louise, but she refuses. At a motel, a drifter they picked up, JD, talks his way into Thelma's room. The following morning, the women discover JD has stolen Louise's money and fled. Louise is distraught, so Thelma takes charge and robs the store using tactics she learned from JD. Led by Arkansas State Police investigator Hal Slocum, the police tap into the phone line at Daryl's house. In his conversations with Louise, Hal expresses his concerns and sympathy, but Louise does not surrender. When a New Mexico state trooper pulls them over for speeding, Thelma holds him at gunpoint and locks him in the trunk of his car. Driving further west, they encounter a truck driver multiple times who behaves inappropriately towards them. They pull over and demand an apology from him, but when he refuses, they blow up his fuel tanker. Thelma and Louise are chased by the authorities, but make it only to the edge of the Grand Canyon. Rather than be captured, Thelma proposes that they keep going. Louise steps on the gas and, as Hal pursues them on foot, they drive onward. In cinema, before the eye of the viewer reaches the screen, there is the eye behind the lens of the camera. The director and cinematographer work in tandem to paint the portrait of each frame of their film. With women taking virtually no part in these roles, the male gaze has been allowed dominance in the medium. The existentialist philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre introduced the concept of le regard in Being and Nothingness, 1943, wherein the act of gazing at another human creates a subjective power difference, which is felt by the gazer and by the gazed, because the person being gazed at is perceived as an object, not as a human being. In the bar scene, note the way the men are looking at Thelma and Louise as they walk in, reverting the male gaze from the eye of the camera to the eyes of the actors in the mise-en-scène. Thelma herself uses the lens of objectification in her viewing of JD, a character who takes over the role of the temptress woman. Men are depicted not as villains, but as tropes of the shadow versions of the masculine archetype. Daryl is controlling, hypocritical, short-tempered, ungrateful, and short-sighted to his emotions. Jimmy is also short-tempered and has a fear of commitment, living life on the road as a musician. JD is a manipulative thief, yet plays a more multidimensional masculine, feminine character in the way he is objectified and in his good-natured politeness. The gun symbolizes the power of the male gaze. Thelma keeps it stored in her bedside drawer and brings it along just in case. When that moment for need arises, Louise's action transforms the gun and their positions behind it. The American road trip is a cultural icon symbolizing freedom, independence, self-discovery, and the evolving landscape of infrastructure entwined with nature. One of the most significant pieces of media that explores this significance is Jack Kerouac's On the Road, an inspiration for the Beat Generation and later the 1960s counterculture movement. It is the spirit of adventure that ties a person on a journey to the road. Road trip buddy movies, like this one, explore the dynamic between contrasting individuals as they are stuck sharing in the democratization of travel by car. One drives and one is the passenger, so only one gets to call the shots. Louise is the owner of the car and primary driver, but there are moments where Thelma must take the wheel. The conflict lies in this dynamic. Louise is a neat, sharp-tongued woman hardened by her years as a waitress. Her shooting and killing of Harlan turns this on its head, unraveling her little by little until she fully commits to life on the run. She has her cigarettes, alluding to her aloofness towards the life she lives, as it has disappointed her. As her hair gets messier, she gets more and more free, and she does not tolerate the outburst or shoddy proposal from Jimmy. She takes a sip from Thelma's bottle of wild turkey, and from then on she has passed the point of no return. The only thing she keeps with her are her ghosts, the companions she brings with her everywhere. At the start, Thelma is a housewife, afraid to even ask her husband Daryl to go on a 2-day trip with her best friend. She is free-spirited in nature, though, but this is a dangerous mix with her naivety. When Harlan attempts to hurt her, she breaks down, realizing how cruel the world is. Life on the run soon becomes appealing, though, and she finds herself having a knack for armed robbery, thwarting the police, and standing up to her no-good man. Her major turning point is her calmness after JD steals the money. After that, her once flowy dresses and bouncy curls are replaced by a more masculine wardrobe and a feeling of awakeness. That freeze frame at the end leaves the viewer's belief suspended in air, as they know the two will ultimately end up at the bottom of the Grand Canyon, but we never see this happen. In our minds, we want to believe that the heroes simply kept going. This film's brilliant script, cinematography, and editing stand out across the board. The acting and costume design add another layer of storytelling that cannot be discounted. First of all, the car. For anyone who loves classic cars, a Thunderbird may be a bit of a basic choice, but I have to admit this 66 convertible model in green is one of my ultimate favorites. The way it deteriorates along with the women as they are on the run makes it into a sort of noble steed. It also clearly stands out among the other cars on the road shown in the film, highlighting the beauty and the spirit of the two heroines. I love this Hans Zimmer score and the soundtrack, and the blend of diegetic sound. Singing along to the radio on a road trip is the best part, right? I love seeing that captured on screen. The score kind of reminds me of Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon with that dreamy, hazy guitar riff, or a little bit like Shine On, You Crazy Diamond. Police officer Hal keeps track of Thelma and Louise, saying near the end that he feels like he knows Louise, despite the walls she has built up. He is a well-meaning father figure. I love the scene where he puts JD in his place, and this portrayal of the masculine archetype is overwhelmingly positive. stern, strong, one with his emotions, and powerful among other men. However, it is his emotions that best him in his work in the end, which is a common feminine experience. Manifest destiny is a concept originating from the 19th century U.S., when American imperialism began, believed to be a divine right, like father, like son. Thelma and Louise's journey is similar to this belief that if they make it to Mexico, they'll be drinking margaritas and have no care in the world of the destruction they are making along the way. Only this all catches up to them, just as any entitlement yields. Feminism is the starting point, not the ending point. To quote Ferris Bueller, "Isms, in my opinion, are not good." Why? It is in the practice that most get lost. The etymology of ism originates from English in the late 17th century, meaning the action or process of doing something. If we are to practice isms like feminism, we must understand why we are taking these actions in the context of our own lives and communities. This film explores the action of two women tarnished by a caricature of the patriarchal world that leads them to a brief stint on the run from the law. In the context of this film as a piece of art attempting to convey a message, the action of feminism is to critique the male gaze often used in these types of road, buddy, outlaw, and crime westerns. Empowerment in this way takes the form of a handgun, which these two unlikely feminists unleash on their aggressors, becoming the very form of violence enacted upon them. Thelma and Louise demonstrates the power feminism holds when used as a tool, and any ism for that matter. To take action is to strive for truth in the process outlined by an ism, but to abandon it on one's own terms. Identify only to the point where the ism doesn't make you an ist. Don't be a feminist. Practice feminism. Do what feels right and live according to the experiences that planted your roots and allow you to grow. Hopefully, that doesn't mean driving off the edge of the Grand Canyon. But if you do, for goodness sake, do it in a '66 Ford Thunderbird.